This sum should cover the shipment.
Indeed, Signor. Let me just verify the accounts.
This is the story of the world's first financial empire, built not on gold, but on blood. Florence, 1429. A banker named Giovanni di Medici lies in a silk bed, sweating and gasping, not from illness, but from something far more deliberate: poison. His wife weeps at his side. The city whispers, and before he takes his final breath, Giovanni gives his most trusted clerk one order: burn the ledgers. Because numbers weren't just ink on a page, they were weapons in Renaissance Italy. The Medici family understood something no one else dared to admit. Money was power, and power could buy anything: popes, kings, even death itself. They didn't just lend money, they owned people. They blackmailed monarchs, bankrolled wars, and erased rivals from history itself. The streets of Florence may have been filled with art, poetry, and beauty, but in the shadows, bodies floated face down in the Arno River. What they built wasn't a bank. It was a criminal empire dressed in silk robes and blessed by the Vatican. They turned the sin of usury into the fuel of an empire, and they made the rules so that no one could touch them, until the day those same rules came back to destroy them. By the time you finish this story, you'll see how a backstreet moneylender became the richest man in Europe, and why his bloodline would tear it all apart. This isn't just history. This is The Godfather, written in ledger books and signed in blood. Stick with me, because what comes next will reveal how the Medici turned money into a weapon. They didn't just bend the rules, they wrote them in blood. And if you think modern banks are ruthless, hit subscribe, because the real story is only getting darker. Florence, 1397. The air smells of wet stone and roasted chestnuts. A young man named Giovanni Medici walks quickly, a hood drawn low over his brow. In his hand, a small leather pouch, heavy with gold coins. Tucked inside his belt, a knife. His destination? A dim, smoky tavern on the edge of the Mercato Vecchio. It's not the kind of place a respectable banker is supposed to be. But Giovanni isn't here to drink. He's here to collect. And in this city, if you can't collect a debt, you won't live long enough to spend it. At the back table, a nervous merchant named Pietro sits with his eyes darting to the door. His shirt is open at the collar, sweat beading on his temple despite the cold. Giovanni sits across from him, lays the pouch on the table, and doesn't speak for a full 30 seconds. Giovanni, quietly. You have until the feast of St. John, not a day longer. Pietro swallows. He knows what that means. And as Giovanni leaves, the tavern door swings shut, blocking out the light. Pietro never makes it to the feast of St. John. In medieval Europe, lending money for profit was a sin. The Catholic Church called it usury, and it was punishable by excommunication. But Giovanni had a talent for finding shadows in the law. He discovered that if you didn't call it interest, if you disguised it as fees, penalties, or exchange rates, you could charge almost anything. The church looked the other way because the church itself needed loans. One of Giovanni's first big clients wasn't a merchant. It was a nobleman whose estate was drowning in debt. The deal? A discreet loan of 500 florins.
At the equivalent of 32% annual interest hidden in currency conversion charges.
The nobleman signed without a second thought. And when repayment came due, he didn't pay in coin. He paid in favors, land, influence, and the right for the Medici to collect taxes in his territory. In Florence, money wasn't the only currency. Power was worth far more. Giovanni's office wasn't just a desk and quill, it was a vault for secrets. Locked in a small iron chest was what his clerks called Il Libro Nero, the Black Book. It wasn't a normal ledger. Instead of numbers, some pages listed only names and cryptic instructions. One entry read, "Silence the tailor, use the Venetian." Another, "The baker's son, double the rate, his father can't refuse." The book was the Medici's true weapon. Every debtor owed them something. Some owed coin, some owed loyalty.
Power attracts enemies. The Albizzi family, Florence's ruling bankers before the Medici, saw Giovanni as a threat. They tried the polite route first: political pressure, legal challenges, even church sermons denouncing usury. When that failed, they tried steel. One rainy night, Giovanni's carriage was ambushed outside the city gates. His driver was killed instantly. Giovanni escaped with a slash across his arm and a new understanding. In Florence, there were no courts, only winners and corpses. The retaliation was swift. 3 Albizzi agents were found in the Arno River the following week. The message was clear: cross the Medici and you disappear. From that moment on, Giovanni wasn't just a banker, he was a man to be feared. By 1420, the Medici weren't just wealthy, they were untouchable. They controlled trade routes, political offices, even the papal treasury. But their greatest mistake was believing that money could shield them from vengeance. Because soon, a dagger would come for them, not from their enemies, but from inside their own family. And the son who picked it up would turn the Medici fortune into a throne. Comment below, would you have borrowed from the Medici, or was the price too high? Florence, 1433. In the flickering torchlight of a wine cellar, a boy, barely 17, clutches a leather-bound ledger, stained with his father's blood. Above him, footsteps thunder. Outside, the streets roar with shouts, "Down with the Medici!" His name is Cosimo de' Medici, heir to Europe's most feared banking empire. And tonight, Florence has sentenced his family to extinction. The Albizzi family, his father's sworn rivals, have bribed the Signoria, the city's ruling council, to strip the Medici of power and banish them forever. For most men, exile is a death sentence, but for Cosimo, it's a challenge. In the shadows, he makes a decision that will change history. He will not flee, he will not beg. He will buy his way out of exile and turn this coup into the single greatest act of financial warfare the Renaissance has ever seen. This is not just survival. This is Cosimo's gambit. At dawn, the palace guards arrived at the Medici residence. Cosimo's father was already dead, poisoned months earlier. And now they came for the son. The charge? Corruption. The truth? The Albizzi feared the Medici's growing wealth more than any army. In Florence, trials weren't about justice. They were theater. The Albizzi staged it perfectly. The courtroom packed with hostile guild leaders, paid witnesses whispering lies. But Cosimo, he just listened. He wasn't here to argue law. He was here to pull strings. While the judges debated his fate, Cosimo's clerk smuggled out a single scrap of parchment to his bankers. Stop the gold. Every florin, every branch. Overnight, the city's heartbeat faltered. Merchants couldn't pay suppliers. Soldiers went unpaid. Even the bakeries stopped baking. No one could afford flour. By morning, panic spread. Florence wasn't just arresting a man, they were suffocating their own economy. Desperate to end the chaos, the Albizzi sent word: give up the Medici fortune and they'd let Cosimo live. Cosimo's reply was simple: I'll pay double to the judges. Hours later, gold changed hands in taverns, monasteries, and brothels. One coin purse even arrived hidden inside a basket of figs for the court scribe. The verdict shifted like a tide, but Cosimo wasn't done. If the Albizzi thought they had trapped him, they were about to watch him turn exile into a chess move they could never undo. The Medici network was unlike anything Florence had ever known. It wasn't just bankers.
When the sentence was read, exile for 5 years, the Albizzi cheered, but Cosimo didn't leave in chains. He walked to the city gates in a silk doublet, greeted like a diplomat. The crowd didn't jeer, they bowed. And before he stepped out, he turned to the guards and said, "Exile is for beggars. I prefer a vacation in Venice." In Venice, he opened new branches, struck deals with Florence's enemies, and poured gold into every hand that could hurt the Albizzi's hold on power. The Albizzi thought removing Cosimo would end the Medici, but all they had done was give him room to build an empire beyond Florence's reach. Letters intercepted years later revealed the truth. While in Venice, Cosimo funded Milanese armies, brokered trade blockades, and even bankrolled artists to tarnish the Albizzi name in Florence's own piazzas. By the time the Albizzi realized, the city's loyalty was gone, sold piece by piece to the boy they'd tried to destroy. A year after Cosimo's exile, Florence was on its knees. The Albizzi had drained the treasury, trade had collapsed, and winter brought famine. The guilds, once the Albizzi's power base, now begged for the Medici's return. Cosimo set one condition: total control of the city's finances. No rivals, no limits. When Cosimo returned, he didn't ride in like a conqueror. He arrived in a banker's carriage, counting coins. His revenge wasn't swift, it was surgical. He bought up the debts of every Albizzi supporter, then instead of demanding payment, he forgave them, on one condition: loyalty. A dead enemy is forgotten, he told an aide. An indebted enemy? That's leverage forever. Under Cosimo, Florence passed an unspoken law: never exile a banker. Instead, tax him, use him, keep him close. It was the birth of a principle modern bankers still live by: too big to fail. By 1434, Cosimo ruled Florence without a crown, without an army, but with more power than any prince. And now his eyes turned toward the greatest throne on earth, not in Florence, but in Rome, the papal throne. Next time, you'll see how the Medici didn't just lend to the Vatican, they owned it, and why one pope would call them worse than the devil. If you think Cosimo's exile was genius, smash that like button and subscribe now, because the next chapter will show you how the Medici bought God's bankers. Rome, 1447. A dying pope gasps his last confession, not to a priest, but to a Medici banker. Cosimo de' Medici leans in, listening closely as the frail man whispers a secret that could shatter Christendom. The Vatican is bankrupt. The gold of St. Peter's is gone, the coffers dry, and the Pope owes more to the Medici than to God himself. If anyone could save the church, it would be Cosimo, but for a price. And he smiles, not because he is a savior, but because eternal salvation has just gone up for sale. The church had long banned lending with interest, calling it a mortal sin, but Cosimo found a loophole. Interest became voluntary donations for forgiveness, and suddenly, sin was a commodity. Ledgers reveal Pope Eugene IV himself borrowed 50,000 florins, with Rome itself listed as collateral. Across Europe, Medici agents sold indulgences, promises to erase sins in exchange for coin, keeping 40% of every payment before it ever touched the Vatican's hands. A receipt discovered centuries later in Germany recorded payment for the sin of murder, 200 florins. Even death and damnation could be negotiated. The Medici didn't stop there. They funded the Pope's private army, providing elite guards and mercenaries in exchange for silence, and occasionally for the removal of troublesome clergy. One burned letter survives, a fragment scrawled in haste. The Bishop of Siena resists, correct him. The clink of coins, the rustle of parchment, the unsheathing of swords, these were the tools of Cosimo's power. When Pope Nicholas V died, Cosimo moved swiftly. Medici gold secured the votes of 12 cardinals, placing Enea Piccolomini on the papal throne as Pope Pius II. But power has its limits. Within months, Pius II turned on his benefactors, calling bankers bloodsuckers of Christ's flock. Yet the debt chain was too strong. His protests mattered little while his coffers remained empty. Hidden in the depths of the Vatican, a false-bottomed chest contained the shadow ledger. It recorded every bribe and payoff, 10,000 florins plus a ruby ring for a cardinal's support, 500 florins to a friar to remain silent about a Naples loan. The church hierarchy itself had become a network of debtors to the Medici, beholden to Florence's bankers. Decades later, the Medici would go beyond influence. João de' Medici ascended to the papal throne as Leo X, proclaiming, "God gave us the papacy, let us enjoy it." Rome became a carnival of excess. Thousands of church offices were sold to fund parties, art, and hunting expeditions. A bishopric cost 8,000 florins, enough to feed a city for a year. Money flowed like a river, yet whispers of corruption grew louder. In 1517, Martin Luther saw the greed firsthand. He watched indulgence sellers fleece the poor, and in outrage nailed his 95 Theses to a church door, igniting the Protestant Reformation. The Medici, busy counting their gold, dismissed him as a nuisance. That arrogance would echo through history. By 1527, the consequences of unchecked greed erupted violently. Rome burned. Mercenaries once hired by the Medici turned on their masters, looting the Vatican, slaughtering priests, and destroying priceless art. The last Medici pope hid inside a coffin meant for a saint, trembling as flames and chaos consumed the city they once controlled. If you thought banking was ruthless, this was a new level. Cosimo de' Medici had not just lent money, he had bought power, influence, and even God himself. And yet, for all the gold and clever schemes, no empire, however cunning, could escape the flames of vanity and human ambition. Smash that like button if this story shocked you, subscribe to follow the saga, and comment, was this holy fraud or just banking? Rome, 1527. Smoke curls into the sky like dark ribbons over the shattered city. The streets, once paved with gold and marble, are now rivers of ash and blood. Mercenaries hired by the Medici, soldiers of fortune once loyal, have turned on their masters. Chaos reigns, and the very empire Cosimo built teeters on the edge of ruin. The Medici had lived for centuries through cunning, bribery, and cold calculation. They bought kings, silenced rivals, and even controlled the papacy. But greed, like fire, always seeks oxygen. One wrong ember, one misstep, and everything ignites. Inside the Vatican, flames lick the ceilings. Priceless art, manuscripts, and treasures meant to glorify God now crackle and burn. Priests flee, clutching relics and robes, as the soldiers hunt down the last of the Medici heirs. Some are clever enough to hide, others are not. The city's wealth, the ledgers, the coins, the very proof of their power, turns to smoke in their hands. Cosimo's descendants, once untouchable, scramble through secret passages. The streets outside are chaos incarnate. Shouts, screams, and the clatter of hooves on stone fill the air. Every corner hides a potential death, and yet, even in the fire, their cunning survives. Medici agents slip through the chaos, moving gold and sensitive documents into secret vaults beyond Rome. For a moment, It seems the family might endure. But the world has shifted. Power is fleeting, and the flames of human ambition have no loyalty. The Medici Empire was built on leverage, debts, and influence. But as the bonfire of the vanities consumes the city, even their most intricate schemes fail. Letters and ledgers that once commanded kings and cardinals now lie in the ashes. The legacy of Cosimo, the young banker who once outsmarted assassins, faces its ultimate reckoning. And in this inferno, history watches silently. The same city that once trembled at the Medici's name now watches them burn. What remains is a lesson etched in fire. No empire, no matter how clever or ruthless, can outrun the consequences of hubris. From the ashes, the world will remember the Medici not just for their wealth, but for the perilous edge where ambition and greed meet mortality. Florence, 1574. A young woman kneels in a shadowed chapel, clutching a lock of her husband's hair, cut from his cold, lifeless head. The doctors called it fever, but she knows the truth. He was murdered by his own family. Her name is Bianca Capello. Tonight, she becomes either the deadliest weapon of the last Medici or their final victim. Grand Duke Francesco I is a man consumed by obsession. Hidden in his chambers, he experiments with poisons and alchemy, scribbling in his journals. Test 47. Basilisk venom plus mercury equals instant paralysis. He trusts few, and he should not trust his brother, Cardinal Ferdinando, who sends him gifts of medicine secretly laced with arsenic. Death wears the face of family in Florence, and betrayal is a dinner guest. Bianca sees the cracks in power and steps in, a Venetian with charm as sharp as a blade. She seduces Francesco, weaving ambition with desire. She demands marriage, forging a papal decree that nullifies his first union. Even the Vatican, still dancing to Medici gold, bends to her will. A hunting trip turns deadly. Both Francesco and Ferdinando fall violently ill after a lavish dinner. Only Ferdinando recovers, having just happened to carry the antidote. Servants whisper in terror. Candles flicker in empty halls. Florence itself seems to hold its breath. But Bianca is not one to flee. At the funeral feast, she serves the same dishes that killed her husband, forcing Ferdinando to refuse in front of hundreds of nobles. She wears white mourning robes, faintly stained, a silent declaration that vengeance walks among them. When she demands an autopsy, the corpse reveals the blackened tongue of arsenic poisoning. Ferdinando bribes the doctors and burns the evidence, but the message has been sent. Desperation and cunning mix in her final move. Bianca claims pregnancy with Francesco's heir. Her bump is nothing but silk pillows, yet the threat is real. She invites Ferdinando to a reconciliation dinner, knowing that both know it is a death match. A chair scrapes across the floor. Goblets are poured. The tension is almost unbearable. Morning brings twin coffins. Bianca and Ferdinando lie dead in separate rooms, poisoned by a dance of deceit, neither fully controlled. The last Medici bank accounts are empty. Ledgers that once controlled kings and popes turn to ash. The dynasty that ruled Europe for 2 centuries collapses quietly, almost whispering itself out of existence. Yet even in ruin, their legacy persists. In 1630, a ledger surfaces, recording a Vatican debt of 2 million florins, never repaid. The Medici may be gone, but the systems they invented endure. Years later, in 1799, Napoleon's troops storm Florence and find the Medici vaults, sealed since 1737. Dust, cobwebs, and a single open ledger greet them. One entry reads, "To the House of Bourbon, 300,000 florins, due Judgment Day." The family that once bent kings, cardinals, and popes to their will didn't just play with money. They wagered against eternity itself. If you felt the weight of their rise and fall, hit subscribe to follow the saga. Comment, "The curse lives," if you think justice found them, or "Bankers never die," if you suspect some of their gold still lies hidden, waiting for its master. Florence, 1737. The city is quiet now, its streets shadowed by centuries of history. The Medici family, once the rulers of Europe's wealth and power, has vanished. But whispers persist, whispers of treasure hidden, secret ledgers lost, and fortunes that even kings could not claim. For decades, rumors spread about the Medici vaults: gold, jewels, priceless artifacts, hidden somewhere within the palaces, cloisters, and secret passages of Florence. Scholars, treasure hunters, and thieves have scoured the city, yet none have found the full extent of the fortune. It is as if the Medici had taken their wealth with them into the shadows, leaving only breadcrumbs of legend behind. Among the most tantalizing clues are letters written by Gian Gaston, the last Medici heir. In these fragile parchments, he hints at hidden caches of gold, disguised as mundane items, and maps drawn with invisible ink, meant to be revealed only with the heat of a candle. Some say he distributed the family's wealth in small, clever doses to trusted servants, ensuring that even if the palace fell, the fortune would remain unclaimed. The Vatican, too, owes its own part to the Medici legacy. Records indicate loans never repaid, debts that stretched from Rome to Paris, from Naples to Venice. One ledger entry, still legible, reads, "To the House of Bourbon, 300,000 florins, due Judgment Day." A haunting reminder that even in death, the Medici had leverage. Yet the treasure is more than just gold. It is knowledge, influence, and secrets. Documents detailing illicit deals, coded letters, hidden contracts. They are a wealth that cannot be melted down or stolen in the traditional sense. For anyone who uncovers them, the Medici's cunning remains alive, whispering across time. Napoleon's troops in 1799 tried and failed to claim it all. They broke into vaults sealed for decades, finding dust and cobwebs, but no vast piles of gold. Some pieces, yes, but the largest treasures had vanished. Where? Some say they were smuggled to Venice, others claim Genoa, or even distant lands across the Mediterranean. Legends tell of chests sunk beneath rivers, buried in countryside villas, or hidden in crypts beneath palaces. The thrill of the hunt continues today. Florence still holds secrets, hidden doors behind frescoes, trapped doors beneath libraries, and crypts forgotten by time. Every explorer dreams of finding a Medici fortune, yet every attempt seems to meet failure or mystery. It is as if the Medici themselves haunt the city, protecting what they created with cunning unmatched by any mortal hand. But perhaps the most fascinating treasure is intangible. The Medici proved that power and influence could outlast kings, armies, and even families. They showed that money, carefully manipulated, could control history itself. And in this sense, the lost treasure is everywhere, in banks, governments, and institutions that still follow principles first codified by Cosimo, Lorenzo, and their successors. Somewhere in Florence, in the shadow of the old palaces, the final Medici secrets wait, silent and patient. Gold may have crumbled to dust, but the legacy, the lessons of ambition, strategy, and cunning, endures. So, what do you think? Did the Medici leave a fortune still waiting to be found? Or did their cunning vanish with them? Smash that like button if you love a story of hidden treasure, subscribe to follow the saga, and comment below, "Found it" if you believe the gold still exists, or "Gone forever" if you think the Medici took it all to the grave. The year is 1800. Florence is no longer the jewel of Europe. The streets that once rang with the clink of coins and the murmur of merchants now whisper with ghosts. The Medici name, once spoken with equal parts awe and fear, has faded into something else, a warning, a relic of what happens when power grows too hungry. But beneath the Palazzo Medici, in the cold damp of a forgotten crypt, a single candle flickers. Its light trembles over a figure kneeling before a rusted iron chest. the lock long since broken. Inside, no gold, no jewels. Something far more dangerous. A ledger. The last surviving book of the Medici Bank. The one that was never meant to see the light of day. Its pages are brittle, its ink faded, yet the numbers are still there. And what they tell is not just a history of transactions. It's a map. A map to the Medici's final, desperate gamble. In their last years, as enemies circled and their empire crumbled, the Medici didn't run to other banks. They didn't hide their wealth in palaces or ships. They moved it somewhere far more permanent. Art. But not just any art. Pieces chosen with precision. Commissioned, collected, hidden, with a purpose. Because they had discovered something even they could not buy. Time. And they intended to cheat it. The family's final fortune was locked into masterpieces by Michelangelo, Botticelli, Da Vinci. But each one carried something else. A secret, a code, a clue. Together, they formed a trail leading to the Medici's last vault, holding not just gold, but their true legacy. And then, they burned every record, every map, every note, except one. The ledger now resting in this crypt. For centuries, it lay in darkness, known only to a few servants, dismissed as a relic of a dead dynasty. Until now, a young scholar from Naples, a man with no name worth remembering, stumbles upon it. What matters is what he does next. He follows the clues. He reads the code hidden in Botticelli's Primavera. He cracks the cipher woven into the stonework of the Medici Chapel. Piece by piece, the truth emerges. The Medici didn't just hide their wealth, they weaponized it. The treasure was never meant to be found. It was meant to be unleashed. The final clue brings him to a small chapel in the hills outside Florence. No gold, no coins, no glittering hoard. Just a painting. Cosimo de' Medici.
Cold eyes, a faint, knowing smirk. Etched into the frame, 5 words. The debt is never settled. The scholar chuckles. He's heard the curses, the ghost stories, the whispers of vengeance, superstition, he thinks. Then, he notices the dust on the floor, disturbed, fresh scratches at the base of the painting, and a smell, bitter, metallic, like the inside of a banker's vault. He reaches out. The wall behind the portrait shifts. A hidden door creaks open. Beyond it, darkness, a staircase leading down. He hesitates, and then he takes the first step.
The Medici may be gone, but their game isn't over. Smash the like button if you want to step inside the vault and uncover what the Medici truly left behind. The air in the hidden staircase is heavy. Damp stone presses in from all sides, and beneath it lingers a metallic tang, the ghost of coins long vanished, long spent, long forgotten. The scholar's candle flickers, throwing trembling shadows against the walls. Every step echoes, like the stones themselves are whispering warnings. The stairs spiral deeper than Florence should allow, twisting into darkness as if the Medici had tunneled past the earth itself into a place older and darker. At last, the passage opens into a chamber, not a vault of gold, not a treasure room, a tomb, but not for bodies, for secrets. The walls are lined with iron shelves, groaning under the weight of hundreds of ledgers, their spines cracked, their pages yellowed with time. The scholar pulls one free, and the brittle pages crumble at his touch. Names, dates, and amounts. Loans to kings, bribes to popes, debts owed by men whose descendants had long since forgotten them. And then he sees it. At the far end of the room, resting on a pedestal, lies a single ledger. Its cover is pristine, untouched by centuries. He approaches cautiously. The binding is strange, like skin or parchment. He doesn't want to know which. He opens it. The first line is written in a hand so precise it could have been etched yesterday. If you are reading this, we are already dead. But you are not here for our past. You are here for your future. Beneath it, a list. Not debts, names, his name. And beside it, a sum. A sum he never borrowed. A sum he now owes. The candle gutters. A cold draft snakes through the chamber. Somewhere above, a door slams shut. And in that instant, the scholar realizes the truth. The Medici never lost their fortune. They moved it into the future, into him. And the vault, it was never meant to keep intruders out. It was meant to lure them in. The Medici's final trick, making you their last debtor? Smash like if you want to uncover what happens when the ledger claims its next victim.
The scholar steadies his hands, closing the ancient ledger with care. The candlelight dances over the cold stone walls, revealing the hidden staircase that twists upward. Every step he takes is measured, cautious, but his mind races. Why was his name, his mother's surname, even the street of his birth written in the ledger of a family long gone? As he ascends, the answer begins to take shape. The Medici were not merely bankers, they were strategists. Every loan, every ledger, every code was part of a larger design, extending beyond Florence, beyond centuries. His presence here was no accident. The scholar realizes the Medici had planned for the future, entrusting their secrets to someone capable, someone intelligent enough to understand, preserve, and perhaps unlock their true legacy. The scholar emerges from the hidden staircase, blinking as daylight spills into his eyes. The weight of the ledger in his hands feels lighter now, yet heavier in meaning. He has walked where no living soul has walked for centuries, tracing the footsteps of a family that once controlled kings, popes, and entire nations, not with armies alone, but with cunning, influence, and foresight. As he examines the ledger, he begins to understand. The numbers next to his name, his mother's surname, the streets of Naples, they were never a demand for repayment. They were a code, a key left by the Medici. The family knew their wealth could not remain hidden forever. They had devised a system to ensure that the right person, capable, curious, and clever, would eventually follow the trail. And that person was him. The ledger was not about debt, it was about responsibility. Every entry, every sum, every hidden note pointed to pieces of art, secret vaults, and scattered treasures, not just gold or jewels, but knowledge, influence, and lessons in strategy. It was the Medici's final gift, a carefully constructed legacy, waiting to be discovered by someone worthy. He steps into the open courtyard, the Florentine sun warming his shoulders. The city seems alive again, whispering stories of centuries past. He realizes that the Medici never lost. They simply transferred their power into time and wisdom, leaving a map for those who could read it. The scholar smiles. He does not see a path paved with wealth, nor does he see a path of danger. He sees a path of understanding, of learning from history. The Medici's loan was now his to interpret, to study, and to preserve, not as a curse, but as a legacy of strategy, vision, and foresight.
In the days that follow, he catalogs every clue, every hidden contract, every coded message. The world outside remains unaware of the treasures tucked away in Florence's shadows, but the scholar carries the Medici story forward. He knows one thing with certainty.
The family's influence will endure, not in coins or ledgers, but in the ideas they left behind, in the strategies that shape nations, and in the lessons of ambition, patience, and intellect.
Some debts are never financial. Some debts are lessons. And the Medici's greatest debt, to history, to knowledge, to the future, has finally been repaid.